The previous one used to say the clock is against us, so I'll have to talk fast. Right. I'm Bob Hume. I was formerly principal teacher of English from 97 to 2015. That's right, those sunlit lands pre-pandemia. Please don't hold that against me. Better start with this spot telling you what it isn't. This isn't a celebration of Buchan's anniversary. That's next year, and there's bound to be some people who will do things about that. It's also not one of these kind of spots where I get to say, I've taught this in my classroom, it works very well. I haven't. This is all aspirational. It's a kind of invitation to use these short stories. Now, hands up at the outset, 3 of the 4 are longer than I would have expected to use in the days when I was putting them in front of children. But consider the target group that's mentioned in the intro to the short story text. Target group would be those coming to the end of BGE with legitimate expectations of doing higher English. There's a case for saying, well, maybe we should be, as David Gold was saying, challenging people to look at texts that would be different from before. Perhaps beyond BGE as well, but that's something for another day. Also, this spot, there's a teaching resource which will be online in the ASL website, matched to the short stories. Teaching resource has a set of tasks, pretty much a narrow focus. My kind of starting off point with them was that the short stories for me seem to be very effective writing, full stop. You can say many things about Buchan, but what he certainly could do was he was very effective as a writing stylist. Even more specifically, the narrow focus on writing. It's here? Yeah.
So we wouldn't, do you want to stand behind here then, and that would go there?
Next stop out the door. Right. It's got a very narrow focus looking at the short stories as examples of effective writing, and even more specifically looking at them as effective description of place. It's analysis of how that works. Fairly standard stuff: word choice, connotation and denotation, use of sound, control of rhythm, and of course sentence structure. And there's tasks that take simple steps towards mood, character, theme. Also, most of the tasks, what they do is, you would say that it's formative work on developing skills. And they're mainly focused on discussion. There's not really anything much that you would call summative assessment, if we still use those words, within the teaching resource. There's something quite like a textual analysis hidden in there, but other than that, no. The resource is pretty flexible as well. You can edit it down from, you can take it down from the website, you can edit it as suits you. You can do as much or as little as you want. And the same goes with the short stories. So, what about the short stories then? Right, well, the content of the short stories. 2 of them are about the flooding of border farmlands, which it turns out happened as much in the 19th century as we know about these days. What you get with the 2 of them, and that's Heard It Stand Land and the Rising of the Waters, is that Buchan treats this topic pretty differently. One of them he makes into something very like a horror story. One of them is what you would call gentle humour. The humour over cups of tea in the manse, because Buchan was a son of the manse. The other pieces, well, the one short one, The Hill of Caedmure, that's an odd thing. It's his first ever published piece. And it's like a combination of, if you know Ambrose Bierce's One of the Missing, melded it together with Natal Corby's. It's an odd thing, but it certainly catches the attention. The last one, the longest one, School Scary, it's a piece where a gifted amateur and ornithologist, they're always gifted amateurs in Buchan. A gifted amateur ornithologist gets isolated on one of the skerries in the Norland, which is the Faroe Islands. And he comes close to losing his grasp of reality. His rational scientific mind is almost undone by three things: by the place, by its history, and by the weather. And these are things that Buchan is very good indeed at writing about. So, if you can do it later, but if you look at the handout that's got 3 pages of, I think it's the intro to the teaching resource and a couple of pages on two of the different stories, you'll see the kind of territory we're talking about. It's pretty much bog standard. There's not anything with star quality, but there's a lot that you can write about, and it's just a case of if we get kids to discuss things and to look at how the writing works, how and why the writing works so well. So, why use these stories? Well, my starting off point is something I heard a young teacher saying 20 years ago or so. What was it she said? What other European country would turn their backs on their literary heroes? Because make no mistake about it, Buchan is, for the amount that he wrote and the times that he lived through, he is a kind of heroic figure. But what he also is there's a quotation about him, the difficulty he had to put up with. He was an outsider. In England, he was always thought of as a Scot. In Scotland, he was always thought of as English. I think that goes with the borders. So, what about his central concerns? Well, the two from Grey Weather, the early short story collection, and the ones about the floodings, the damage wrought by climate. That sounds pretty modern to me. At the same time, what he really enjoys writing about is to do with the redemptive powers of nature. If you feel bad, go for a walk in the hills, or go fishing, go hunting as well. But before you think, oh, wait a minute, better not mention that, one of the things I should say to you is that book, John McNabb, that's the one that's still bought most by customers. Something else worth mentioning about that, linked to his popularity in Canada. David Goldie mentioned that. That's partly for ancestral reasons. It's obviously partly for his success as a writer. But when he was in Canada, he was a major figure in the promotion of the national parks movement. There are 2 enormous national parks named after him in British Columbia. Not many people know that, on this side of the water anyway. So, why else pay attention to him? Well, you heard David Goldie point out about his concern with borders and frontiers and the symbiotic relationship between people on both sides of the borders. Physical borders, geographical borders, moral and ethical borders. Certainly important. And following on with that, it's an old-fashioned way to say it, but the probing of the thin line between civilization and chaos. How topical is that? Well, turn on the news. Buchan's solution to some of the issues that he was talking about was to promote and prop up the British Empire. And, well, we're living with post-colonial guilt, aren't we? Basically, it's a discredited view, it's a discredited approach. But I hope you would agree that in some of the aspects that I've mentioned, there's a modernity there that is well worth looking at again in short form, in the short stories. You've also got to remember, he was born a Victorian. So he's still a man of his times for all the different things that he wrote. So, you convinced yet? Right, thanks for your attention. Is there time for 1 or 2 questions? Oh, we can run the clock back, can't we? Right, I've got one question. Would it help you if we got together an audio reading of the stories, complete with border accent? Some of my former teachers used to quite like the business of somebody else's voice, switch it on, brackets, do your marking, but there you go. Okay, thanks for your attention.